Hi, I'm Tom from Archangel Manufacturing, gunsmith here. Today we're going to go through the installation of the Archangel M1A stock on your M1A rifle. There's a few things that you're going to need to do the installation. This is a roll of masking tape, and really all it is to make it a little easier to stand your rifle up on its top like that. The other thing you may need is a flat file. The flat file is for fitting your fitment pads for your trigger group. You may not need this, you may very well need it. When you open your package up, your rifle will come with a compliance part for those of you who live in a state that requires a non-pistol grip type stock. We'll go over installation of this later. When you get your stock out of your package, it's going to have this filler block in it. The filler block keeps the nylon from shrinking in the action here. The characteristics of nylon is that over time it shrinks and contracts over an area. It's a hygroscopic material, which is a good thing because when you put your action in there, it'll actually shrink up to the action, giving it like a near glass bed action fit or glass bed fit to it, similar to having a gunsmith do a custom fit to your rifle. So first I'm going to start out with taking the rifle out of the factory stock. Obviously the first thing you want to do is make sure that your rifle is clear, there's no ammunition in the area. Put the rifle on safe, pull back on the back of the trigger guard, pull the trigger guard out of the rifle. Set it off the side, and you can just lift the stock off and out, off of the action. We'll set it off the side. We'll set the rifle action off the side and show you how to knock the block out of the action. Just using any punch or whatever. This happens to be one of our defense pins. Basically knock that polymer block out. Take this out. Don't throw this away. If for some reason you take your action out of your stock and you're going to send off your action to a gunsmith, or you're going to put it in a different stock for a while, you want to reinstall this. The lettering on the top of it is the top of the stock, so you're going to want to put it right back in the way it is. It should be a tight fit. Drive it back down in there and then store it like that. If you have a stock that you've purchased, say from somebody else, and it's been sitting for a while and does not have this, you should obtain one of these. Give us a call, we'll get you one, and you can drive it in place, let it sit for a couple weeks, and it'll make installation a lot easier. That's your storage block. So, first thing you want to do is turn your new Archangel stock upside down, take your trigger group, and slide it down into the stock. Put your hand underneath it because there's going to be part of the trigger coming out the bottom of it. You can also use your tape if you'd like to support it up off the table. Push down on the trigger group to make sure that it goes down into the stock and it's not binding. This one here is a tight fit, which is good. You can also take your storage block and you can set it up here and you can tap it with a hammer. This is a non-marring plastic block, it won't hurt it. You can tap it in place. I have a hammer on hand, so I'll just tap it down like that, and you can do that all the way around the thing and make sure it goes down. And this one is a snug fit, and I can see that it goes down in there. So you want to pull that back out. If it's a really tight fit and you've driven it down in there with a hammer, you want to look in here and check for plastic that's scraped off. Anywhere any of these surfaces have scraped any plastic off, you're going to want to look down in there and make sure that they're not underneath and not allowing it to go all the way down in and seat completely. So once you've assured that your trigger guard goes in, seats completely, you pull that out, set it to the side. We know that fits. Another tip, these are the trigger legs. The legs, when you pull this down, those legs cam over the action and pull the trigger guard together with the action. It clamps the action down together. So this is pulling, these fingers are pulling this way, pulling down on the action, pulling the trigger guard up, which is what sandwiches the stock in between it and holds it in place. It's a good idea to put some really good lubricant on these legs right here, the camming surface, some grease, some of your roller grease that you lubricate your roller with works great, it's suggested. So lubricate your cam legs, your trigger guard legs, and we'll set that off to the side. Next step, go ahead and put the action back on my masking tape here. You take your stock and you stick it in the ferrule. You're going to find out right away that it's a real tight fit to your ferrule up here. Again, that's done for accuracy purposes. It's a press fit into this ferrule here. So I'm going to show you how to do this. You basically put it together. You'll be able to see your lugs are starting to go into the pocket there, but they're actually forward of the pocket, and it won't go together completely. So you stand it up, take your tape off. You'll be able to see right there that ferrule is not all the way down against the stock in the front there. You see right the gap between the ferrule here and the tip of the stock. We're going to seat this ferrule down onto that stock. So grab it here like so, and then you want to grab butt down here, and you're going to pull the two together. So grab, and just bump it together. Now you see how it went back together down here, and then you can see the ferrule is now seated, or real close. Probably could smack it again. You know, there's a little bop there. Okay. So now that ferrule is all the way seated against there, and it's tight. There's going to be no movement like a glass bed fit that you'd have done by a gunsmith. Now you're going to want to put your masking tape back on there. Just makes it a lot, not mandatory, but the masking tape makes it a lot easier to take your hands off the rifle and it won't roll around on you. Push down on the stock onto the rifle just to seat it completely. Take your trigger guard. On the trigger guard, on the right side of the trigger guard, there's a little finger here. It's not on the opposite side, but it's on one side. That little finger has to go into a groove in your action. So you're going to want to grab a hold of it. This seems to work pretty well, and slide it in and line that groove or dovetail into the groove in the action itself. Push it down in there. Again, you're going to want to push it all the way down in there. If need be, you can smack your block with a hammer and drive it all the way down into the action. Since you've already fitted your trigger, it should go in relatively easy. We know it fits. Now what we're going to want to do is push back on the trigger guard and down on the stock. I don't know if I'll try to get you to see this. You can see the receiver. There's a gap between the receiver and the stock. When this lever, the trigger guard cams over, it's going to pull that gap down. It's going to be almost no gap when we're done. It can be zero gap or just a little bit of gap. Either way, it's okay. But I'm going to try to squeeze on. When it cams over, it pulls that stock down into it and sandwiches the trigger guard and the stock and the rifle together. So to make sure, this is where we have to fit these pads. Underneath these pads right here, underneath the trigger guard, there are pads intended for fitting. What we do at first is you push down on it, get a hold of the rifle here, push down on the back of the stock, which is forcing the receiver into the stock, and then push back on the trigger guard. Now this is tight, but it still fits. If the trigger guard will cam over and touch the back of the trigger housing, you can just push down and smack it in place. Now that's a really tight fit. It's just about perfect fit. Some of them will not cam over. If you cannot get it to touch, if you cannot get it to cam over and touch like that, if it'll only go to here and you're pushing on it, and you can see I'm pushing on it with a thumb. You don't want to wrench it down and bend the trigger guard. If you're bending the trigger guard, you're pushing too hard. If that's the case, if you cannot get it to cam over, you're going to want to pull your trigger out. Safety off. Tight fit. You can pull your trigger out, and these fitting pads right here are what's underneath your trigger. If it needs fitting, there will be little marks on that fitting pad right there. If there's little marks on there and it won't close down, then that's when you take your flat file and you file that surface right there. You go a little bit at a time, you take the marks off evenly on both sides, and then test fit the trigger. If it still won't close, do it again, a little bit at a time. The object is to get it as tight fitting in the stock as you can get without taking too much material off and getting a loose fit to it. The tighter you can get it without being ridiculously tight gives you the highest potential for accuracy. So with this particular rifle and stock, it goes in, it's just a nice tight fit. You can push down, get it to touch back here, and it closes on there. Something I need to mention is, even though you have masking tape here, this is 1-inch masking tape. 1.25 gives you a little bit more height over the top of your sight. If you don't want to mess with your sight adjustment, I would recommend using thicker masking tape. If you don't care if you haven't sighted in your rifle yet, it is highly recommended to run your rear sight all the way down so it's protected by the ears. And then you put your masking tape roll on there and it protects it even further. The AAM1A stock utilizes the factory handguard. It doesn't even have to be removed to install the stock. You can just leave it on, take the factory stock off, and reinstall the stock without taking the handguard off. If your handguard is missing, you can get a factory handguard or any other handguard that'll fit a factory stock, and it'll work on the AAM1A stock. Some of the offerings out there are a forward scout mount rails systems out here. Some of them will require inletting. Basic rule of thumb is if you have to inlet the factory stock to clearance the rail, you're going to have to inlet the Archangel stock. But it can be filed just like the pads. You can file and fit anything on there. If it will fit on a factory stock, it'll fit on this stock. It may require relieving of the stock material to clearance the Picatinny rail. If you're not comfortable with that, taking it, I highly recommend take it to a gunsmith that has the machinery or the skill to inlet the stock. Generally, it's a small amount and you can get it with a file, but if you're not comfortable, take it to a gunsmith. A note on fitting the stock, filing the outside of the stock. If you're going to be using anything other than a file, I recommend layering several layers of masking tape on the outside of the stock where you're going to file. The reason being is if you slip and mess up and hit the outside of the stock with the cutting tool, whether it be a Dremel tool or a file, the masking tape will protect the stock. Basically, once you scratch the stock, the scratch is there. You can clean it up, but it's still going to be a scratch on your stock. If you put masking tape over it, you scratch the masking tape, you peel the masking tape off, you're good to go. Some notes on fitting the Polytech rifle. The Polytech has some extra material on the receiver, in the back of the receiver on one side. In order to get it to fit in the Archangel stock, you'll need to relieve some material from the inside edge of the Archangel stock. That can be done with a Dremel tool, a file, or a mill. What you'll need to do is identify where the extra material is and where your action into the stock, do your normal install, and then you'll see where it's actually hitting. And then you can go in here and mark it with a pencil where you need to relieve the material, and then go back in there with your file, your Dremel tool, or whatever tool you decide to use, remove that material, go a little bit at a time, check for fit, cut and check, don't go crazy and go too far, and you might get gaps on the outsides of it. Again, any cutting you're going to do on the top edge of here, I would recommend covering the edge with 4, 5, 6 layers of masking tape before you start cutting on it. So if you have an overrun, you don't tear up the outside of your finish and you can't tell. It'll take the masking tape off, it protected your stock. The other thing are the match grade or rear lug receivers. On a rear lug receiver, there's a block of steel in the back of the receiver, somewhere back in here. They vary from who made it. The factory might put it here. The gunsmith that built one might put it 100 thousandths farther forward or backwards or whatever. Even less than that. They can be just a little bit forward and aft. You have to cut your stock to fit the lug. From out of the package, a rear lug rifle will not go into an Archangel M1A stock. You have to cut that pocket out. You have to measure and mark and figure out exactly where to cut that, mill that pocket out, and that pocket has to be milled out extremely tight fit to that rear lug, or you'll lose the purpose of the rear lug. The rear lug is there to spread the recoil impulse out to a wider area. If you machine it out loose, you're going to lose that, and it'll still function, but you'll lose your rear lug, the whole purpose of having the rear lug there in the first place. If you want to glass bed that rear lug or any other part of the rifle, you want to go in with a rotary tool and you want to roughen up the surface. When you've cut out your pocket that you're going to glass bed, go back in there and make it rough. You want to have not only the chemical bonding of the epoxy bedding compound, but you also want mechanical bonding, rough surfaces, so it bonds really good in there. It's going to take a whole lot of pounding when you're firing the rifle from the recoil, so you want as much bond as you can get. So roughing up the surfaces, giving undercuts will give a much longer life of your bedding. If you can get away without bedding it when you put your rear lug in, the polymer will hold up way longer than the bedding will. So if you don't need the bedding in the rear end, don't put the bedding in it if you can get it tight enough. But if you need to, make it rough and it'll bond much better. For those of you that need to comply with your state laws regarding a pistol grip, some states don't allow a pistol gripped rifle and may consider this gooseneck grip a pistol grip. We have included a filler piece that goes in here that does not allow the web of your hand to go below where the trigger exits the stock. That's what this piece is here that comes in your package, and it goes right in there. And it fills in that gap and keeps your hand above, the web of your hand above there. Now to do the installation, there have been successful installations with just gluing it in alone. It was also designed, it was actually designed to be screwed in. There is a hole that goes partially through the part. So if you want to glue it in, there's no hole in the top. If you want to screw it in, which is a much stronger attachment, then you're going to be drilling a hole, and I'll go through that in a minute here. To install the part, you need to remove the cheek riser. And you remove the cheek riser by simply turning the adjustment knob and raising the cheek riser up till it won't raise any further. So we'll just do that now. When the cheek riser won't go up any further, you'll kind of see it tip off. Take the cheek riser off, set it off to the side. Don't remove the adjustment wheel. You can put them back together, but they can be a trick to put them back together. There are some tricks of the trade to put them back together, but you don't need to remove it. So let's set that stock to the side. And now we've taken, I have a 7/32 drill installed in the drill here, and we're going to stick the drill into the hole that's already there, and we're going to drill through the top of it. Once we have a drill that goes, or hole that goes straight through the top, take the stock, stand it back up here. I'd recommend clamp it in the vise, padded vise, that way you don't have to chase the stock around while you're doing it. So you have the hole drilled in your compliance piece, set it on top of the stock like that, stick your 7/32 drill in there, go right through the hole, down to the stock. Make sure your compliance piece is pushed down and in place, and drill through. You're drilling straight through the grip area into the grip compartment area. So there'll be a hole that goes straight through the stock into the grip area. Now you take this piece that you drilled through off and set it off the side, and you're going to change your drill bit to a 1/4" drill bit. If you look at your drill bit, you can slip your 7/32 back in there, and you can see you're straight right in the center of that V. It's going straight down in there. You're going to want to drill with a 1/4" drill bit right back down through there and open that hole up to 1/4". So we'll pull that out of there. Put our 1/4" drill bit in there, straight up and down. Now we have clearance for our 1/4" bolt. It's a 1/4 bolt that goes back up in there. We stick our compliance piece on here, turn it upside down, open your door, and put your 1/4 bolt in there and tighten it down. You're forming threads in the plastic with the 1/4 bolt. You don't need to crank it down. You don't need to torque it down beyond hand tight. If you go too tight, you're going to strip the threads out. Because the threads of the bolt are going into a polymer piece of polymer, they pretty much self-lock themselves into it, so it's not going to vibrate loose or come loose. Once you've got that installed in there, you take your cheek riser, stick it right back on top of the stock, push it down as far as it'll go, and then turn the cheek riser like you would lower the cheek riser. You're just screwing the cheek riser down. And it'll go right back down. You run it all the way back down or to what your setting is, and now you're compliant with your state laws if required. If you have any further questions, you can call us or you can go on our website at archangelmanufacturing.com or find us on Facebook at Archangel Manufacturing.